So if we look at nutrition in India, we have a pretty interesting phenomenon, which is this is the share of people who are eating below 2,100 in urban areas and 2,400 in rural areas. So why are these? This is the number of calories they consume per head. Why is this? Why are these interesting thresholds? Yeah. Oh, sorry. You had a question, or you were just moving?
Yeah, I was going to ask something.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was wondering if that necessarily, if that couldn't just be explained because of like inflation and not necessarily like a negative effect.
Very good. It could be that the relative price of food has changed, right? That people have become richer, but food is now more expensive. Remember, it has to be relative prices, right? Because people have become richer in real terms. We always do. It's even corrected for inflation. India is richer now, and there are also fewer poor people. But it could be that food prices increase relative to other things. And that's actually not the case until 2005. And then it became very much the case after 2005. But these results are until 2005, where the relative price of food were relatively stable. That's a very good point. 2,100, 2,400? Yeah.
So it was just sort of a calculation that was done for people who are doing sort of intensive labor, how many calories they would need as a bare minimum to be able to succeed.
Right, so this is what, again, we don't really know how many calories we need, but this is what the Indian government says you need. And maybe they get it a bit wrong because this is the fraction of people in rural area who are getting less than they need. So it's very high. Yet, these people are still all alive. And it's also, but what is striking is that this is increasing, both in rural area and in urban area, but even more in rural area. So one first explanation was yours, is maybe it's the relative price of food. That would be true after 2005, but not until 2005. What could be other explanation?
Maybe a lot of poor people have gone from the rural areas to the city, and then very poor remain in rural areas, and then the sort of poor go to the urban areas, and both sort of.
Right, so that's a very good suggestion. So it may be that the people who are in rural area now are the very, very poor, so they are relatively poorer. So we get more of them who are eating less. And the urban area also getting poorer because the people from the rural area moved to them. That's a very good suggestion, a composition effect. That probably doesn't explain it, because if you look at the overall consumption per capita of these people, or the fraction of people who live below $1 a day, that's going down here and down here. So that's probably not the...
There's been more technology for them to spend money on other stuff than just food.
Right, so this would be another explanation, which is the similar explanation from what we are seeing around the world, which is there are more and more things available. In particular, one thing that has clearly happened is the advent of cell phone. And so now cell phone weren't there, now they are there. In India, you can get a cell phone and airtime everywhere. And so that's one thing. So more things become available. Very good. Yeah.
I think this might be what she meant, but technology that might make the work easier, so you require fewer calories because the work is not as difficult.
Right. This is not what she meant just now, but that's what she meant earlier. So I was surprised she is not making this point again. But that's exactly a very good point, which is maybe these are what the Indian government says, but who knows what they know, and maybe the calorie requirements have changed. One of the reasons could be that you're less likely to do back-breaking work, or maybe because there is more irrigation, there is more mechanization of agriculture. People are less likely to be in agriculture, even in rural areas. What would be another reason why the calorie requirement would have gone down? So one is clearly you are less likely to work. What's another? What competes with calories with you?
Talk about words, health.
Warmth and health, so, and diarrheas, and other nice things like that. Generally, being sick consumes a lot of calories. And so if people, one thing that has happened in India is drinking water has become more available and cleaner, so people are much less likely to be sick. Another thing that uses a lot of calories is being pregnant, and you have fewer children being born, fewer children being born, so that's also compete less for calories. So one possible reason for all of this for these changes is that the calorie requirements have just changed, and people are staying at the same level as before. Takes them less, and they're used to a particular level, so they just stay there, and it costs them less money than before. So why are people? So this leads us to a possibility for what people are not eating more generally. Maybe they're not eating because that's not such a great investment. And so when we went through our little theory section here, we said that if you happen to be right here in the capacity curve, it's very valuable for you to eat. But if in the real world, the effect of calories on productivity is not that large, then you might as well do something else with your money. And in fact, what we find when we look at the effect is that this is the effect of calories consumed on your productivity if you're a farmer in Sierra Leone. And it's hard to find a job that requires less strength than being a farmer in Sierra Leone. And what you find is what? Well, it is increasing, certainly. People who eat more, this is your calorie consumption, and this is how productive you are. People are more productive when they eat more. But what's the shape of the curve? It's our inverted L shape. And it's not greater than 1. So now we finally can answer the question that you asked ages ago. There's no really sign, and this is probably the most favorable case, which is why I put it on the board. There's no real sign that this phenomenon that you need to eat enough calories, otherwise you can't be productive enough to do anything, is really there. So in the very short run, everything starts to fit, which is people don't really need the extra calories that much, because the extra calories make them productive, but not that much more productive. Hence, they're not eating them. And in fact, we see over time that they're eating less and less of the calories because they need less and less of them. And they are a level of strength that allows them to do their day-to-day work. And with the rest of the money, they do other things. And that makes now perfect sense. So in terms of policies, what does it mean? In terms of policies, it means that policies that are going to insist that the big problem is starvation in terms of not eating enough grain are probably going to be misleading. And are probably going to lead to a fair amount of, and they are probably going to lead to a fair amount of waste. Nevertheless, you probably shouldn't go away thinking, so in summary, at the maximum, when your income today increased by 10%, your calorie consumption increased by 3.5%. That's what we saw in India. And that's almost surely a wild overestimate. But let's say that it's a maximum possible. And then your productivity increased by another, you multiply that by another 4%. So when your income increased by 10%, your income increased by 1.4% tomorrow. That would be the S shape, except it's not S, because there is no point where it would cross the 45-degree line from below, because the elasticity is much, much less than 1 instead of being above 1. So we don't have a place where the curve is crossing the 45-degree line from below. The curve is just not steep enough to create a poverty trap from this phenomenon. Just to be sure that you don't go away thinking everything is well, this may be very different for other things than calories, for example, iron. And this may be very different for children, because the investment in a child, the investment you're making at one specific time is going to help them for their entire life, instead of just for tomorrow. So what we are going to do on Thursday is look at what I call the hidden trap, which is that there might be a nutrition productivity poverty trap, but it's not in the usual sense where we were looking for. It's in these more subtle things, nutrients, micronutrients, children nutrition, pregnant women's nutrition.